Hebrew, yeah.
Bilingual.
Israel accept the Palestinian entity if it were federated with Jordan?
No, and I made it clear explicitly wherever I spoke in New York.
Mr. Allon, do you see it as a foregone conclusion that the Palestine Liberation Organization will be given some kind of recognized status by this session of the General Assembly?
It may happen, although I did my best to persuade foreign ministers and delegations to the UN to refrain from doing so, or at least to contribute their share in postponing the whole debate to next year, at least in order not to hamper the Geneva conference. But I can't say that I'm optimistic on this matter. I'm more encouraged than before I left for New York, because I met with greater friendship than I expected. But when it comes to the very vote, there is no ground for optimism.
If in fact the PLO is given this kind of status, what difference is this going to make to Israel? What's Israel going to do about it?
No, it's not so much how it will affect Israel directly. I'm afraid it will affect the Arab world. Such a recognition will encourage Arab extremism everywhere. And those Arab politicians or groups or movements who began to be a little more realistic as a result of the Yom Kippur War may go back to the dreams of pushing us into the sea and all sorts of such things. And therefore, I think that this may also introduce some misunderstandings in the East Bank, in the West Bank. It will make things much more difficult to solve, although it cannot affect directly the state of Israel as such. But what I have said is quite a pity, because we wanted to achieve this year something.
Mr. Allon, will Israel negotiate with the Egyptian, Syrian, or Jordanian delegations at Geneva if those delegations include members of the Palestine Liberation Organization?
This is a highly hypothetical question, because from the experience we know already, the Egyptians and the Syrians and the Jordanians have included in their delegations only their own subjects. And as we know, in Geneva, more than 50% of the delegates of Jordan were Palestinians. And that's quite enough to represent the Palestinian case or cause, whatever you want.
Mr. Allon, Henry Kissinger is returning to the Middle East this week. We know what he's not going to do by what he said. No shuttle diplomacy this time, no instant solutions. But what is he going to do?
Well, I think he has a great job at his hands. It is nearly half a year since the disengagement agreements have been signed, and it's time now to search or to explore what should be the next step in the political effort. Now, as a result of his forthcoming trip to the Middle East, maybe all of us, I mean, Israel and her neighbors and the American mediator, will know clearer than today the procedure for the next step. With whom are we going to negotiate first? Where? When? On what? And also, we have to exchange views about the Geneva Conference. All of us agree that the Geneva Conference should reconvene. The question remains when. And I think that these things may be clarified while he is in the Middle East, and this in itself would be considered by me as a tremendous achievement.
Do you think he's got a chance of doing all this in a few days?
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
What I mean is do you see the atmosphere is set for this, with your visit, with the visits of the Arab foreign ministers? Is it just require a few more hours now?
No, I'll tell you. If I am to judge what would be the Arab attitude from what I heard in the UN, from the speeches, all of them, they were extremely counterproductive. And therefore, I think that we can't negotiate with the Arabs or with the Arab states by exchanging speeches in the assembly, which is important in a way, but this is not the way how we can exchange views. It's the wrong place to exchange views public speeches. And therefore, I think that because of this extremist expression, maybe Dr. Kissinger's visit has become more vital, more important. Maybe he will be the only man who can really study the feasibilities of certain steps and make us all a little wiser than today.
Mr. Allon, today is the first anniversary of the October War.
Yeah.
How has Israel changed in the year since that war?
Well, first, we have lost the prime of our youth, and this is a tremendous loss that can never be forget, and it's an open wound in our feeling and our history. I'm sure it affects every Israeli. It affects many Jews abroad. Secondly, I think that the Israelis are less deluded today. They don't live under illusions. They are better prepared than before the Yom Kippur War. I have ground to believe that Israel will never be taken by surprise again. And many lessons have been learned from that tragedy and from the great victory, one of the greatest in our military history. And by the same time, I think that the Israelis are maybe more Israelis begin to understand how important the political endeavor is, not just in order to clear one's own conscience that I'm doing my best to achieve something politically, but really to leave no doubt, neither in Arab minds nor in our own minds, that a special effort is being made.
To somebody?
No, there was not such a statement today in the New York Times. We always spoke that if and when a territorial compromise will take place within the context of peace, or depends on which front we are talking, or interim agreement, certain things can be achieved. But I was very careful in all my public appearances, including in my speech at the United Nations, when I said that we would prefer an overhaul agreement on a durable peace with the Arabs. But if we realize that the time is not ripe yet to achieve this ultimate goal, the government may consider favorably an interim agreement.
With Jordan as well?
I didn't refer to any country whatsoever, because once you start with countries, first, none of us is authorized yet. Secondly, by mentioning one, you are leaving out the other one, you create new problems. I was very careful on this matter. And I was not quoted, by the way.
Mr. Allon,
What has been attributed to me here.
now getting back again to the anniversary of the October War. I spoke to many people today, and many Israelis feel that the odds are better than 50-50, that yet another war will break out within the next year. Do you share this view?
I would say very briefly, a war is possible, but not inevitable. There is a fair chance to avert another war, or at least to postpone it, provided two things are being done. First, the continuity of strengthening of Israel's military might, namely to cope with the changing balance of strength between us and the Arab armies as a result of the lavish Soviet supplies of arms to some Arab countries. And secondly, to stick to the political movement, to try and keep the momentum alive. I think we can, thanks to our rationalism, combine those two endeavors at one at the same time. They are not contradictory. They are really, they are complementary.
Mr. Allon, you made the first speech in history in Hebrew to the General Assembly in New York. Why did you do that?
I'll tell you, I guess there will be no problem with Egypt. The renewal of the mandate of the United Nations Emergency Force should take place in the Security Council on the 24th of October, this month I mean. I don't think there will be any problem. My guess is that the Syrians may try to drag it to the last moment, but I'll be surprised if they don't give the political option another chance, and they will renew it. This is my hope, but nevertheless, let us keep our eyes open on all fronts.
You have been given no assurances either way.